terms have a lot of invisible parts to it, and it's very common for people when they see the terms to, since they don't see the invisible parts, to just assume they're not there. So we're going to go over the parts here that are invisible so that you will know what's there, because they affect how you're going to solve problems. So here is a term. Can you tell me what the invisible parts of this term are? All right, let's look at it. Is that what you wanted to write? So as we can see, there are a lot of different parts here. We've got the sign, we've got a coefficient, we've got two exponents, and we even have a multiplication sign. Coefficients. Let's look at this. What is the difference between this and that? This is 1x. That's the way we would say it. And this is x, which you could also say 1x. So let's look over here, okay? What does 2x mean? The 2 here, the coefficient, is telling us how many x's we have. So since this is 2x, that means we have 2 x's that are being added together. This coefficient, 5, means we have 5 x's, and they're all being added together. This, how many x's do we have here? We just have 1. And since we like to make things look as clean as possible and do as little writing as possible, when we have a 1x, we just write it as x. So, when are coefficients invisible? They're invisible when they are a 1. Again, coefficients, not a constant, a coefficient. Coefficients, when they are a 1, we don't write it. They're invisible. Now let's look at exponents. This is very similar to what we were looking at with the coefficients. What is the difference between r to the first power and r? Well, let's look at this again. What does the second power mean? What's the exponent telling us? It's telling us that we have 2 r's and that they're being multiplied together. So r to the second power means we've got 2 r's multiplied together. What does this exponent tell us? R to the 5th power. Well, it means we have 5 r's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're being multiplied together. Remember, if it was a coefficient, it would be over here, and this would be adding. But since it's an exponent, they're being multiplied together. Now look here. R to the first power is the same thing as r. So that means there's an invisible 1 here. Here there's an invisible 1 for each one of these. And if you add up these coefficients, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you get 5. Here there's an invisible 1 for each one of these. You add them up, 1, 2, and you get a 2. So the only time we write the exponent is when it's some other number other than 1. If there's no coefficient showing up here, that means there's an invisible 1 there. So when are exponents invisible? When they are a 1. That's something that coefficients and exponents have in common. Variables. When are variables invisible? They never are. You always have to show your variables, so you're never not, if there's a variable there, you're going to see it. They are never invisible. So here's a question though, because this is a trick one for a lot of people. Is this variable negative? We see that there's a sign here, and it's a negative sign, and it's directly to the left of this x. There's nothing in between it. Or is there? Again, let's look at this. Remember that that variables are a symbol that represent a value we don't know. We don't know if this value is negative or positive. So this negative sign can't be attached to this. So what is this negative sign attached to? Well, it's attached to the invisible 1 that is right there. Remember, when a coefficient is 1, it's invisible. So when we see a negative x, what we really mean is it's a negative 1x. This can be very confusing for people if you forget this. So practice seeing negative x really means negative 1x. Another example, negative y. Negative y has an invisible 1 right there. Negative r, again, has an invisible 1 right here. So variables, we don't know if the variables are positive or negative until we solve for them. But when we see an x and there's a sign to the left of it, that sign, even if it's positive, if we have a positive, which we wouldn't have to write that, but a positive x, it really just means a positive 1x. Okay? So signs attach to the numbers, not the variables. They attach the coefficients. All right, so let's review. Coefficients. When are coefficients and exponents invisible? When they are a 1. And when are variables invisible? Never, never, never. Variables are never invisible.